her, but here is Brenda Strong.
Thank you. As they say, I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV. I think it's perfect that they scheduled me after lunch because all the blood in your brain is going to your stomach. So you can just sit and relax and listen to my voice. I won't tax you too much intellectually. I do want to talk about a field that I came upon because it was something that I experienced, and I went through infertility myself. And as a yoga teacher, I started to use the ancient scientific study of yoga to work on my own body, to help to balance my hormones and kind of right the amenorrhea that I was experiencing with my secondary infertility. So I just want to ask a quick question, and that is, what does fear, shame, and stress have in common? And the quick answer, of course, is infertility. So using the ancient techniques of breathing and body movement, I've tried to educate the students that I was working with about what is the stress response, what is fight or flight, and what happens in your body when that takes hold. As many of you probably already know, it has to do with our survival. It has to do with the limbic system in the brain, and it was the ingenious kind of hardwiring that allowed us, when we were threatened by, let's say, a saber-toothed tiger, to allow all of the blood in our body through the excretion of cortisol to be pushed through the adrenaline to the outer extremities of the muscles, which of course moves away from the organs so that we could very quickly flee away from the assailant. Well, unfortunately, that worked great in past history when we were cavemen, but now, every day, we're facing something stressful, whether it's a call from the IRS, or you find out that your FSH is too high, or you've just had a miscarriage, or it's just the day-to-day life being in traffic in a city. We're assaulted by circumstances that turn that fight or flight on. And that's our sympathetic nervous system. Just like right now, you're not having to think about digesting your food, right? Your food is nicely digesting on its own. Similarly, you're not having to think about breathing. Your breath is simply maintaining its rhythm on its own. But there is something that happens when you go into that fight or flight that a lot of people don't know, and that is that you can use your breath to arrest that stress response, to literally stop it in its tracks, because it's the one thing that you can control. So going back to my background, I'm an actress, right? So growing up, doing scene study, we have to manufacture emotions that are literally real to ourselves. And our bodies don't know the difference between imagined or real circumstances. So it's our reaction to those imagined circumstances that can make our heart race, that can make our palms sweat, that can bring tears to our eyes. So I started thinking, why isn't the inverse true? Why can't we use our breath and our imagination to slow that stress response? So I'm going to give you an opportunity today to actually have an experience with that, but that's a little later. So what happens when you're in this constant barrage of stress response? Of course, what happens is you get chronic stress, which can then lead to the weakening of the immune system, et cetera. But you also have an emotional bank that gets taxed. And you don't have the reserves to respond in a conscious way. You start just reacting. So chronic stress affects hormones. It can shorten the luteal phase. It can affect the timing of egg release. It can cause sleeplessness. And it also affects the immune and inflammatory response. So it actually does have a physiological component. Now, the industry will say stress doesn't cause infertility. And I believe there's no research that could back that up. But I do know for certain that infertility causes stress. So now what do we do about that? So couples who are going through infertility, like I said earlier, fear and shame, there's a lot of emotional ammunition that makes people feel very bad about themselves because they can't do the most simple thing of procreation. So there's a lot of feelings of helplessness and overwhelm. A lot of people feel that they start to drown after month of failed cycles. And And a lot of the women that I work with, in particular, and couples I work with, are very successful in their lives. They're A-type personalities. They have a problem, they find out what's wrong, and they fix it. And the very thing that they're successful in the world does not work for fertility, because they're used to doing, and what we're suggesting, not only in TCM but in yoga, is your beingness is actually more important than what you do. Because how you're being is the path to the result that you want. You want a child at the end, but how you're being is actually counterindicative of that result. So my job is to teach them about the human operating system. So there's an analogy that I use with my yoga students. And we all know energy in this room. You talk to the medical community, they'll say it's mumbo jumbo, as Ricky was saying. But energy is real. And it's a flow of energy that we're looking for, right? Because flow of energy brings health. Oxygen creates fresher cells, detoxification, all of that. But when you're afraid, you hold your breath. You go like this. If you're startled, it's the startled response. You see it in babies all the time. They hold their breath. Well, if you're holding your breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop in infertility, you've stopped the flow of energy. So let's equate energy with something we can all touch. Water. Our bodies are made up with the majority of water. I did a little research. They said between 50 and 65%, depending on your age. I don't care about the statics. The statisticians, it's just, that's that. We're made of water. So water is either flowing easily, or blood is flowing easily, or it's not. There's stagnation, or there's flow. So when you're in fear, you freeze. Now what happens to water when it freezes? It gets hard, it gets tight, it gets rigid, right? So if you have a wall of ice and you throw a rock at that rigid, still water that's frozen, you'll fracture it, you'll shatter it. But if you have water that's moving, or a love-based kind of, this is for me, I'm taking my steps on the path, I'm trusting my body, I'm in love, I love my husband, I want to procreate, I'm taking care of my body, everything's fine, that water is flowing. So when you throw a rock into a wall of, say, just a waterfall, what happens? It doesn't shatter. It goes through the water and falls to the bottom. No harm. It just absorbs it. So what I tell my students is everything is for us. We just have to figure out what's in the way of the health. So yoga, like Chinese traditional medicine, is an ancient healing system. And it's a really good application for stress because it's dealing with the reality of the body. So there was a study recently done in November 2017. It was in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. And it studied the effectiveness of extended yoga treatment for women in chronic post-traumatic stress disorder patients, whether they were tsunami survivors, domestic violence, military personnel, anyone who had had percussion of trauma in their life. And those of you who are practitioners know that when a woman comes in and she has a failed cycle after failed cycle after failed cycle, and every month when she gets her menstrual cycle, that is a percussive trauma over and over and over again. Now, they didn't study infertility in this study, but they did study stress. And their findings were that they found that the benefits of mindfulness and increased emotional regulation, they found with 10 to 20 weeks of yoga study, both in class and at home, there were greater changes in awareness of environmental stimuli, perceived stress, anxiety, and resilience. And the one thing that I've found with all of the women that I work with teaching these mindfulness techniques is that it's really resilience that falls away the fastest, whether it's financial resilience, emotional resilience, mental resilience. Women will quit before they conceive because they just don't have the reserve of meeting the stress and the demands on them. So that's what we do. We give them the reserves. We teach them how to breathe. We teach them how to move. We teach them how to receive life. And life comes through the breath. It also comes through our food. It comes through the air. So we teach them about toxicity and mindful thoughts, mindful emotions, and moving the body to keep it fresh and detoxified. So the study found out that there were after the 10 to 20 week course, 83% of those women no longer met the criteria for PTSD. They completely fell off the map. They couldn't even be diagnosed with PTSD anymore. So that was pretty striking. They also found that 1 week after treatment ended, 2 achieved completely asymptomatic status, and at a 2-month follow-up, 87% did not meet the diagnostic criteria at all. So in the 4 fields of fertility course that I teach, we address what I call the fields. And I just love that Dr. Dow talked about the implantation in the ground, because it is the fertile ground with which we conceive. So we teach women about their minds and how their minds can actually cause that stress response. Their thoughts, how they hold something in their minds, can trigger that response. We teach them observing their healthy thoughts versus observing kind of repetitive, unhealthy thoughts, like this is never going to happen to me, why me, all of those things. And we reprogram them through some gentle neurolinguistics about positive affirmations and how these types of things can start to actually program the neuroplasticity in the brain, and that it actually helps their sense of wellness and positivity to hold those thoughts in their minds, first when they wake up and when they go to sleep. We also teach them about their emotions, not to attach to them and not to resist them, that they're just information that is giving them a sense of where they are in the world and where they are in their own path. We help them be aware of their triggers. We help them be aware of focusing